Just before I read my little document, I'd like to introduce my fellow peace activist, Ďun Keli from Dublin, and he is a delegate from the Irish Peace and Neutrality Alliance in Ireland. I just put you on to Tom.
I'll be very brief. Greetings conference from Ireland and the Peace and Neutrality Alliance, or PANA. Our group brings together a range of people from trade unions, political parties and human rights activists. Our two main concerns are the militarization of the European Union and US foreign policy. The fact that over the last 17 years, US warplanes land and refuel at Shannon Airport on their way to various intervention wars in the Middle East and Africa. We are concerned that the PESCO agreement is moving us all towards a European army that is linked to the NATO military alliance. Last year, PANA hosted a global campaign against US and NATO military bases. It was held in Dublin, in Liberty Hall. It was a great success in linking us all together. Last week, a delegation from US Veterans for Peace visited us in Ireland and helped celebrate St. Patrick's Day by joining a protest at Shannon Airport. Two veterans passed the airport security fence with their peace banner. Ken Myers and Tarek Cuff were arrested by Irish police or Gardaí. They were refused bail and they are still today imprisoned in Limerick jail in Ireland. From this conference here in Belgrade, I want to send our best wishes to my two friends, US Veterans for Peace, Ken and Tarek. Thank you. Thank you for your courage in standing up to US imperialism in Ireland and throughout the world. Best wishes to you all here. We all share a common struggle. Let us always remember what happened to Serbian people 20 years ago. Let us always remember how President Slobodan Milosevic died by the hands of NATO. Thank you.
I thank our friends and comrades from Ireland for their solidarity and for contributing to promotion of peace. Recently they held a very important international conference in Dublin. So thank you for your efforts. Thank you very much. Now I call upon Mr. Andrea Martocia from Yugoslav Coordination.
Oh. I've just got my short piece, please. Thank you. Just getting back to a very serious note, and I know it's hard to believe, but just imagine here's a little tiny neutral island, little tiny, even tinier Shannon Airport in the west of Ireland, which is a civilian airport, has actually processed over 3 million American troops through that little airport in the last few years. Just imagine that. In Ireland, neutral Ireland, it's hard to believe. So I'll just try and make this one as brief as possible, because I think most people have said everything. Research into the media coverage of the imperialist war against former Yugoslavia and Serbia has yielded proof positive of manipulation of information, purposeful obfuscation, and serious omissions. What has been and what continues to be presented to the public as objective truth constitutes no more than a plethora of lies, compiled and disseminated, amongst others, by such people as James Half and his associates with the Washington-based company Bruder & Finn Global Public Affairs from as far back as 1991. This is what James Half, the director of the company, had to say to Jacques Molino of France's Channel 2 at the time of the build-up to the illegal NATO aggression against the Serbian communities in Bosnia in 1995, 4 years prior to the criminal NATO bombing of Serbia. Quote, "To be frank, I can tell you that the vast majority of Americans wondered in which African country to locate Bosnia or Serbia. In one shot," he said, "we were able to offer the public a simple story of history of the good guys and the bad guys. The war in the Balkans was planned well before the Western media began to give its version of events from 1991. For example, just to elaborate on what our Italian guest said just a few minutes ago, the National Security Directive, US policy towards Yugoslavia, was issued by the White House, Washington, D.C. in 1984. The document outlined a policy to forge a new Balkan order that was based on the market organization of economies and envisaged spheres of influence for the major powers. To implement this policy, the USA instigated a decade of sanctions against Yugoslavia, simultaneously creating and supporting an internal opposition with funds and equipment, and launched in 1999 a 78-day illegal NATO bombing blitz against Serbia in an attempt to effect regime change, which would result in a compliant and pro-market government. Secondly, the war against Yugoslavia was conducted on behalf of the giant powers because Yugoslavia stood in the way of their interests. It stood as an obstacle to the goals of the New World oppressors, the new colonialism. President Slobodan Milosevic, 17th of October, 2002. And just jumping well ahead, not to take up any more time here, after June 1999 and the bombing of Serbia, the International Red Cross noted some 250,000 Serbs, Albanians, and people of other ethnic backgrounds in Kosovo had been made homeless by NATO bombing and the ethnic cleansing and terror by the NATO-sponsored NATO proxies, the terrorist organization, the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA. Now, I'm just going to say that just lest we forget the 1995 bombing by NATO of the Serbian communities in Bosnia, Operation Deliberate Force. NATO dropped more bombs on Bosnian Serb communities in August-September 1995 than the Germans did on London during World War II, and that was the Portuguese press at the time in 1995. And not to forget, in August 1995, the Croatian Air Force, backed by NATO and Bosnian Muslim forces, launched a massive attack, codenamed Operation Storm, on Serb communities in Krajina, resulting in huge loss of life and forced upheaval of some 300,000 Serbs. Operation Storm was described by the Defence and Foreign Affairs Strategy Policy in London, the DFASP, in a report in September 1995 as, quote, a war crime more than worthy of the crime. I'm just going to fly over a few pages here, my apologies. During the course of his so-called trial in the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTFY in The Hague, former President Slobodan Milosevic warned the tribunal of the fast-growing presence of Al-Qaeda in Kosovo. His warnings went, as you can imagine, unheeded by the tribunal. The DFASP reported that there were up to between 15 and 20,000 mainly Saudi mujahideens operating for the US EU-installed Bosnian Muslim government at the time. And finally, if I may, I'm going to miss out all the details about all of the false flag operations that were conducted in Bosnia in particular, and then, of course, blamed on the Serbs.
It is 9 minutes now.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry. For the third time in this century, the peoples of Yugoslavia have been subjected to a genocidal program masterminded and carried out by foreign capitalists whose aim is to grab the vast human and mineral timber resources of the regions of former Yugoslavia. The Western press said that the NATO bombing of Serbia was an act of humanitarian intervention. We say that it was an illegal act of aggression and further facilitated Western piracy in the Balkans. Thank you. Sorry to go on too long. Thank you very much.